Have you ever felt the sting of being taken for granted by the very people you gave everything to? Have you ever watched your kindness turned into a weakness, your sacrifices dismissed, and your voice drowned in the noise of those who don't listen, because they know you care too much to walk away? Let that sit for a moment. There comes a time in every leader's life, whether you're a parent, a partner, a boss, or a friend, when you realize that the more you chase respect, the further it runs. The more you bend over backward to please, the more upright others stand in defiance. And the more you let your empathy drive your decisions, the more you suffer the consequences of being too available, too forgiving, too invested. But something powerful happens when you stop caring the way you used to. Not stop caring about your mission, your integrity, or your vision, but stop caring about pleasing everyone. Stop caring whether they approve of you, like you, or applaud you. Because the moment you detach from the emotional need to be liked is the moment people start listening. Why? Because authority doesn't rise from affection. It emerges from presence, from command, from a heart that can still love, but a spine that doesn't bend for convenience. When you are emotionally entangled with the reactions of others, they control the strings. But when you untie those strings, you gain back control, not over them, but over yourself. You see, when people know you won't tolerate mediocrity, excuses, or manipulation, when they sense that you are no longer emotionally bargaining for their loyalty, they start adjusting their behavior. They sense the shift. You no longer flinch when they pull back. You no longer over-explain, over-apologize, or over-give. You simply lead. You become untouchable, not because you're cold, but because you are anchored. Anchored in purpose, not popularity. Anchored in values, not validation. And here's the truth. People obey what they respect. And they respect what they cannot shake. When they see your decisions are not swayed by moods, not softened by pressure, and not dictated by fear of abandonment, they begin to trust your strength. They may not say it aloud. They may even resist it at first, but deep down they know, this is someone I cannot manipulate. This is someone I must rise to meet. Not drag down to comfort me. It's not about cruelty. It's about clarity. Clarity of role, clarity of boundary, clarity of power. In the psychology of power, it's not always the loudest who commands the room. It's the most self-contained, the one who doesn't flinch, the one who doesn't scramble to explain, the one who can say no, not with anger, but with calm finality. That person becomes unshakable, and when you're unshakable, people start moving. They start obeying. Not out of fear, but out of alignment. Not because you force them, but because they feel the gravitational pull of your certainty. So you stop chasing their respect. You become respectable. You stop caring if they stay, and suddenly, they don't want to leave. You stop fearing rejection, and they start fearing disappointing you. It's a psychological shift. The absence of your desperation becomes the presence of your dominance, and from here, the transformation deepens. When you stop micromanaging, they begin to self-correct. Why? Because your silence speaks louder than your pleading ever could. When you withhold your energy, they realize it's no longer guaranteed, and the value of your presence begins to rise. They learn to regulate themselves not because you hover, but because they don't want to lose access to the stability you bring. You create distance, not to punish, but to preserve your influence, and that distance becomes the space in which their respect grows. No longer reactive, you are now strategic. No longer emotionally tangled, you become psychologically dominant. You lead with precision, not with pressure, with direction, not with doubt. And what's most ironic? When you stop caring about being followed, that's when your leadership becomes irresistible, because you are now the example, not the enabler, the lighthouse, not the lifeboat. So don't confuse love with weakness. Don't confuse detachment with apathy. To lead with authority, you must first reclaim your center, because only when you stop giving all of yourself away do people begin to understand your worth. Only when you withdraw the currency of your constant concern do they feel the cost of disrespect. You want loyalty, set the standard, then let go of the outcome. You want obedience, be willing to walk away. You want power, then stop needing approval, because when you stop caring, they start obeying. Overcaring breeds entitlement and weakens authority in ways that are often invisible at first. When someone consistently prioritizes the needs, feelings, and comfort of others above their own sense of balance and leadership, they unintentionally send the message that their presence and support are guaranteed, regardless of how they are treated. This dynamic, though rooted in compassion or a desire for harmony, often creates the perfect breeding ground for complacency, disrespect, and eventually entitlement. People begin to interpret kindness as obligation. Generosity becomes expected, not appreciated, and soon, those you once tried to empower begin to view your sacrifices as the bare minimum, not a gift. The psychology behind this shift is subtle but profound. Human beings are wired to test boundaries, consciously or unconsciously. When those boundaries are fluid, easily moved, or inconsistently enforced in the name of care, it teaches people that the rules are negotiable. It tells them that emotional outbursts, poor behavior, or low effort can be met with understanding and forgiveness every time. While this may seem empathetic on the surface, it creates a transactional mindset where the leader's empathy becomes a tool others learn to manipulate. The more you give without asking for accountability, the more they assume they deserve it without earning it. This is particularly dangerous in leadership roles, whether in families, workplaces, or relationships. Leaders who overcare often blur the lines between support and subservience. They take on emotional burdens that aren't theirs. They absorb stress to shield others. They make excuses for underperformance. They tiptoe around others' insecurities, and slowly they begin to lose the authority that once made them effective. Their words carry less weight, not because they are wrong, but because they're no longer seen as enforceable. When someone knows you'll tolerate disrespect or laziness because you care too much to confront it, your authority begins to rot from the inside. Overcaring often fosters learned helplessness in those you lead. When people are constantly bailed out, comforted, and reassured regardless of their actions, they lose the motivation to take initiative or be accountable. Why would they rise to the occasion if your support is unconditional and your standards are optional? The very care intended to build them up slowly breaks down their sense of responsibility and inner discipline. They wait for direction instead of thinking independently. They expect forgiveness instead of earning trust. They come to rely on your emotional labor to manage situations they should be learning to navigate themselves, and this dynamic becomes cyclical. The more people underperform or disrespect boundaries, the more the overcaring leader tries to fix or rescue them, thinking the solution lies in more understanding, more patience, more emotional investment. But this only worsens the issue. Every act of over-accommodation further reinforces the belief that consequences are avoidable and standards are flexible. The balance of power tilts, and soon the leader is no longer leading. They are managing emotions, negotiating respect, and trying to hold together a system that benefits everyone but themselves. Overcaring is not just a personal flaw, it's a leadership liability. It sends the message that comfort is more important than growth, that peace is more important than respect, and that emotional safety is more important than results. While these things do matter, they must be balanced against the integrity of the role you hold. When people fear disappointing you more than they desire your comfort, that's when true accountability forms. But if they believe your care will override your standards, they will always gamble on your empathy. This is not an argument for cruelty, but for calibration. When you show people that care does not exempt them from responsibility, you elevate them. When you enforce standards even when it's uncomfortable, you build maturity. And when you stop cushioning every fall, you give people the gift of consequence, the only true teacher of growth. The overcaring leader must learn that love without limits becomes servitude, and servitude, no matter how noble the intent, always ends in the erosion of authority. Overcaring is a form of self-abandonment disguised as service. It seeks to preserve peace at the cost of personal power, and in doing so, it teaches others to see your sacrifices as duty, your patience as passivity, and your leadership as negotiable. The longer you operate this way, the more others will adjust to your overfunctioning by underfunctioning themselves. What starts as compassion ends in imbalance. What begins as support ends in entitlement. Authority doesn't survive that equation. Detachment is not cruelty, it's clarity and strength. Many people confuse emotional detachment with indifference or heartlessness, but in truth, it is the most strategic and disciplined form of self-control. Detachment allows a person to see reality without the distortion of emotional bias. When a leader detaches, they're not turning cold. They are choosing to separate their decisions from the chaos of mood, manipulation, or sentimentality. This doesn't mean the absence of care, it means the presence of control. It is the deliberate withdrawal of over-identification with others' feelings in order to maintain clarity, uphold standards, and protect one's sense of self. The strength of detachment lies in its ability to preserve personal energy. When a person is too emotionally invested in every response, every reaction, or every need of others, they become emotionally depleted and mentally scattered. Constant reactivity makes it impossible to think clearly, to lead decisively, or to hold firm to long-term goals. In contrast, detachment creates the psychological space to observe patterns, behaviors, and power dynamics without being consumed by them. It allows one to see manipulation for what it is, to recognize when empathy is being weaponized, and to resist the urge to rescue when someone needs to face the natural consequences of their choices. True detachment is a mark of maturity. It means you no longer let your worth be dictated by how others treat you. You don't crumble at rejection, nor do you chase after approval. You stop over-explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. You stop arguing for your boundaries. You stop internalizing every mood swing, every silence, or every sudden change in others' behavior. Instead, you observe, you assess, you respond when necessary, and you withdraw when appropriate. You allow people to show who they are, and you adjust your engagement accordingly, not with malice, but with wisdom. Detachment becomes essential when dealing with those who test limits. People will often push as far as they are allowed to. When you are overly emotionally available, it gives others the subconscious message that you can be influenced through guilt, shame, or affection. But when your actions are guided by principle, not pressure, people begin to respect your emotional autonomy. They may not like your distance, but they come to accept it, because it is stable. It does not waver with drama. It does not bend with every emotional plea. It remains rooted in the long-term view, not the short-term fix. This form of strength is not loud or aggressive. In fact, it is often marked by silence. Detachment gives you the ability to walk away without needing to announce it. It allows you to withhold reaction, knowing that your absence will communicate more than your words ever could. It is the quiet decision to stop feeding dynamics that drain you. It's the internal shift from being someone who absorbs everyone's emotions to someone who manages their own with discipline. And that kind of control is magnetic. It creates a calm authority that others feel, even if they can't explain it. One of the most powerful aspects of detachment is that it disrupts dependency. When someone is used to getting a reaction out of you, whether through guilt, anger, or passive aggression, and you no longer respond, they are forced to confront their own behavior. Your lack of emotional reactivity becomes a mirror. It reflects their tactics back at them without confrontation, allowing them to see the futility of their manipulation. Detachment removes the fuel from dysfunctional dynamics. It teaches people that they cannot use your emotions against you because you are no longer handing them the weapon. In relationships, detachment doesn't mean disconnection. It means you remain connected without becoming enmeshed. You love with boundaries. You help without rescuing. You listen without absorbing. This subtle but powerful boundary allows for healthier connections because it holds everyone accountable for their own emotional management. Instead of trying to fix or control others' outcomes, you allow them the dignity of their own process. You support, but you do not interfere. You care, but you do not collapse. This strength becomes especially vital in leadership. A leader who is too emotionally involved will hesitate to make tough decisions. They will second guess themselves, avoid conflict, and lose credibility. But a leader who is detached can uphold structure, enforce discipline, and still be compassionate. They are respected not because they are feared, but because they are consistent. Their detachment communicates, "I am not here to be liked. I am here to lead." And that message creates psychological safety and order. Detachment is a form of power. It allows you to maintain your emotional sovereignty in a world that constantly demands your attention and energy. It frees you from the compulsion to explain, justify, or win others over. And most importantly, it places you in command of your own inner world, a place where strength is quiet, clear, and unwavering. True influence is born from respect, not from being liked. The desire to be liked is deeply human, but when it becomes a driving force in leadership or relationships, it dilutes power and undermines authority. Being liked often requires compromise, softening hard truths, avoiding necessary conflict, and shrinking one's standards to accommodate others' comfort. While this may preserve superficial harmony, it does so at the expense of long-term influence. Respect, on the other hand, is earned through consistency, integrity, and the ability to uphold principles even when it's inconvenient or unpopular. It is respect that compels people to follow, to adjust their behavior, and to listen, not flattery or charm. When someone is obsessed with being liked, they tend to overextend themselves. They say yes when they mean no, tolerate behavior that erodes their values, and silence themselves to avoid confrontation. Over time, people come to see them as agreeable but not admirable, kind but not compelling. Their approval-seeking behavior becomes transparent, and what was meant to build closeness instead breeds mild contempt. People do not trust leaders who cannot stand firm. They may enjoy their company, but they do not seek their guidance when real decisions must be made. This is because influence requires edge, not just empathy. It requires the courage to risk discomfort in service of truth. Respect is forged in boundaries, in standards that are non-negotiable, and in actions that align with words. A person who demands little but gives everything is often pitied more than admired. But someone who holds others accountable, who speaks directly, and who does not tolerate disrespect earns an entirely different kind of regard. Their presence changes the room, their expectations are felt, and their approval, when given, carries weight, because it is not easily won. This is the foundation of true influence, not the ability to please, but the ability to inspire obedience through character. Being liked is based on short-term validation. It's fragile and conditional. It depends on people's ever-changing moods and perceptions. You can be liked today and discarded tomorrow for one unpopular decision. Respect, however, is stable. It grows over time. It is tested by adversity and reinforced by consistency. Even those who disagree with you will listen if they respect your clarity and strength. They may not enjoy what you say, but they'll acknowledge your authority because you don't speak to be accepted. You speak because it's necessary. That distinction is what separates those who are followed from those who are merely tolerated. There's a powerful psychological shift that happens when you let go of the need to be liked. You stop filtering your words through the lens of others' comfort. You stop diluting your message to preserve approval. You begin to prioritize what's right over what's liked. This shift immediately changes how others perceive you. You become someone who stands alone if needed, someone whose opinions are not easily swayed by popular opinion. People start to measure themselves by your standards instead of expecting you to lower yours for their ease. In influence, certainty is magnetic. People are drawn to those who know who they are and are unafraid to show it. Not because they agree with everything, but because consistency builds trust. When your actions are aligned with your words, when your emotions don't hijack your logic, and when your presence is grounded in principle, people instinctively begin to organize themselves around your authority. You don't have to force obedience. It comes naturally as a response to the order and structure you embody. Those who seek only to be liked often fail to draw clear lines. They hesitate to correct poor behavior, fearing backlash or disapproval. But by avoiding confrontation, they create environments of permissiveness, confusion, and even quiet resentment. People actually feel safer in spaces where respect is demanded because boundaries create predictability. Predictability creates trust. Trust creates influence, and influence rooted in respect lasts far longer than the temporary comfort of being liked. When people respect you, they self-regulate. They rise to meet the standard because they don't want to disappoint someone they look up to. That internal discipline is far more powerful than any external enforcement. It creates followers who are not coerced but committed, committed to the culture, the vision, and the expectations you've set. All of this begins not with charm, not with agreeability, but with the strength to be disliked for the sake of what is right. In the end, respect demands courage. It requires you to speak when it would be easier to stay silent, to hold the line when others push, and to lead with integrity even when no one is watching. When you build your influence on that foundation, people follow, not because they have to, but because they want to. They may not always like you, but they will always listen.